Hello everyone, welcome back to part 2 of Indian English Literature Timeline. This is a two-part series in which we uncover some of the most important and frequently asked authors, poets, playwrights of each period of Indian English literature so that you get a comprehensive idea about its historical context and how you need to go about preparing for NET exam. Having said that, in the first video, we uncovered what Indian English literature is and how it is differentiated from Anglo-Indian literature. At the same time, we started to uncover the first period in Indian English literature, which is the arrival of the Britishers. Then we started to uncover the 1857 to 1920 period. Having covered that, we started to talk about the 1920 to 1947 period. We talked about the nationalistic strain that was visible in poets, playwrights, and authors. So if you haven't watched it yet, please watch the first part now because we are going to continue our discussion from post-independence and that period onwards. So in this particular video, we are going to start with post-independence. We are going to talk about some of the contemporary authors and writers and how today's Indian English literature is sort of creating global influences. So stick till the end of this video and don't forget to make notes. Now, before we move on to the next era, which is the post-independence era, we also need to talk a little bit about partition literature because partition literature acquires a very unique space in the landscape of Indian English literature. The voices that the writers have captured in partition literature shouldn't go unnoticed, right? So the very first writer within partition literature is Khushwant Singh, especially his most important, most famous novel is Train to Pakistan. Then we also have Bhisham Sani's Tamas, right? They have captured the trauma, the human cost of partition. And that is why understanding partition literature is very, very important from that perspective. Again, I've made a video on partition literature. If you want to know more about it, I've linked the video in the description box below, so make sure you watch that one as well. Now comes the post-independence period. India was now free. The question was, what does it mean to be Indian in English? Literature tried to answer that. So what you see now is that writers were trying to be more realistic, right? So you see a lot of realistic voices coming out, urban voices, metropolitan voices. Writers from different communities wanted to express their experiences living in India, right? You find them asking a lot of existential questions, a lot of existential themes being dealt with here. At the same time, confessional poetry, right? So some of these poets and writers are what we are going to discuss from now on. The first poet that we are going to discuss is Nissim Ezekiel. He is considered to be one of the most important poets of Indian English literature. He is often called as the father of modern Indian English poetry. He was part of the Bene Israel community that sort of migrated to India generations ago. He has written one of the most famous poems, that is Night of the Scorpion. You must have heard it or read it or even learnt it in your school, right? So a very important poem in terms of academia as well as UGC NET English. The next important writer and the poet that you should understand and look out for your exam is A.K. Ramanujan. Ramanujan, he taught Dravidian linguistics at the University of Chicago. Apart from being one of the most prolific poets of Indian English literature, he was also one of the most important folklorists of India, right? He collected more than 100 folk tales and published in this collection called as Folk Tales from India, which helped in diversifying the Indian regional experiences and understanding various stories from the remotest corners of India. Some of his most popular and important poems that you need to understand are Speaking of Shiva, published in 1972, that he translated from Kannada verses in English. At the same time, some major poems are Obituary, A River. His poems generally talk about identity, language, and memory. One of the most powerful women's voices during this point of time was of Kamala Das's. She was fierce, she was unapologetic, she was powerful, right? She generally wrote in her mother tongue Malayalam, and her poetry is often categorized under confessional poetry. She has talked a lot about love, about body's wisdom, about reclaiming a woman's body, right? Some major works and collections of poetry that she has published are Summer in Calcutta, The Descendants, and The Old Playhouse, and other poems. Apart from all these poets that we discussed right now, I think we also need to talk about Arun Kolatkar, right? He is popularly known for his long poem Jejuri that was published in 1976, for which he also received the Commonwealth Poetry Prize. It is a beautiful piece divided into 31 sections talking about a visit to Jejuri, which is a famous temple near Pune. Again, all of these poets that I just talked about and whose works that we just discussed are very important from UGC NET perspective, so make sure you're writing them down. And so when you sit down to revise for your NET exam, specifically Indian English literature, you look out for these poets and their works. Now, speaking about fiction and some of the most important novelists of Indian English literature, you definitely have a very extensive list. But out of these, there are some that are really important for you to know, like Bhavani Bhattacharya, right, who famously published his first novel, that is So Many Hungers. It is set against the backdrop of the Quit India movement, right? And the hungers that he is talking about are the hunger for political freedom, for imperial expansion, right? And for food, basically. Apart from that, you also have G.V. Desani. G.V. Desani is popularly known for his novel All About H. Hatter. It is written in a very unconventional manner, almost similar to how Virginia Woolf would write, in the stream of consciousness manner, right? It talks about, the story is about this hero's spiritual quest, who's in pursuit of finding the meaning of life, the true meaning of life. But it's written in a very unconventional manner and very interesting to read. Apart from that, you also have Arun Joshi. Arun Joshi is famously known for The Strange Case of Billy Biswas, wherein the protagonist feels extremely alienated from the society in which he is living in, right, in which he's born and brought up in, and therefore he always finds himself in this liminal space. He always finds himself a misfit wherever he goes. The common thing among these three writers, that is Bhavani Bhattacharya, Arun Joshi, and G.V. Desani, is that they have talked a lot about the individual experiences of the people, of the characters. They have talked about alienation. They have put forth those existential questions, which was quite new and quite different from what the Indian audience was accustomed to during that point of time, right? Apart from these male writers, you also see the emergence of women writers, of female writers, and their voices being expressed through literature. Out of them, some of the most important include Kamala Markandeya, right? She was an expatriate. She was living in England for a number of years, and her most important novel, which is frequently asked in UGC NET English exam, especially Match the Following Questions, is Nectar in a Sieve, published in 1954. The narrator or the central figure in this particular novel is Rukmani, who is a rustic woman, and the title of this novel is inspired from Coleridge's poem. In addition to Kamala Markandeya, you also see Nayanthara Sehgal talking about politics, right? She is popularly known for writing political novels. For example, A Time to Be Happy, that was published in 1958, talking about two North Indian families and how they deal with independence, right? The transition that they face, the kind of changes that they have to go through. All of those things are again very important. Then apart from A Time to Be Happy, she has also published A Situation in New Delhi, The Day in Shadow, very important from UGC NET perspective. But one of the most important and frequently asked female writers in UGC NET English exam is Anita Desai. She is considered to be the youngest of the major Indian English women novelists, and quite different from all the other women writers that we just discussed right now. Anita Desai has always focused on the interior landscape of the characters' minds. What do I mean by that? For example, Nayanthara Sehgal talks about politics, right? Kamla Markandeya talked about the trials and tribulations of Indian women, especially in a domestic environment. But Anita Desai has talked about the mental workings of her women characters, right? The psychology of the women characters, talked about the remotest areas of the minds, right? And how they are sort of laid bare in a novel, and how they reveal the psychology of these women characters. For example, in her novel Cry the Peacock, which was published in 1963, the protagonist is Maya. Now, Maya is obsessed with death. Why? She keeps on thinking about death because an astrologer just mentioned to her that her marriage is going to end in the 4th year itself, because someone, either she or her husband, is going to die by the end of the 4th year. Now, she was so flabbergasted by this astrological prediction that she kept on thinking and thinking and thinking about death, until she lost her mind. She went on the other side and killed her own husband. So this is how Anita Desai has dealt with her women characters. Apart from Cry the Peacock, she's obviously known for some of the major works like Voices in the City, Bye Bye Blackbird, Where Shall We Go This Summer, Fire on the Mountain, again a very frequently asked work in UGC NET English exam. When it comes to drama, we cannot not talk about Girish Karnad. He is a pioneering playwright in Indian English literature who blends myth, folklore, contemporary questions in plays like Tughlaq, Hayavadana, Nagamandala, right? So when you sit down to prepare or revise for your Indian English literature, make sure you cover the works of Girish Karnad. Now, speaking about non-fiction, especially in the post-independence period of Indian English literature, we do need to talk about Nirad Chaudhary. The autobiography of an unknown Indian that was published in 1951 is always asked in UGC NET English exam. It is a very controversial work talking about this small middle-class Bengali boy, has a very sensitive mind and is very curious about life, right? And but at the same time, as and when he grows up, he falls in love with England and the Western civilization. And so the way Nirad Chaudhary has portrayed India and how he has juxtaposed India with the Western civilization with England is quite controversial. And then we have the contemporary era in which writers like Salman Rushdie, Arundhati Roy, Kiran Desai, Amitav Ghosh, Meena Kandasamy, all of these writers, they are shaping Indian English literature today. And what's so different about Indian English literature today and the literature that was produced over all these years that we discussed, right? So when we talk about the literature that is produced today, it's more layered, it's more complex, because we are trying to open and widen our horizons to include a variety of voices, right, from the center as well as from the margins. We are talking about migration, we are talking about diaspora, we are talking about the communities, Indian communities, not just in India but overseas, right? We are talking about caste and gender, we are talking about urban life, at the same time rural life. We are retelling history, we are retelling mythology and from a different perspective, which can be subversive, which can be challenging, right? At the same time, we are also talking about queer identities and resistance writing. All of this makes Indian English literature today more layered, more complex, more inclusive, and more empathetic naturally. As a result of this, Indian English literature is not bound by nation or nation's boundaries. It speaks globally from the Indian experience. So to give you a quick recap and help you simplify your preparation for Indian English literature, always begin your preparation with the arrival of the Britishers and the kind of voices, the kind of thematic experiences that were produced during that point of time. Then you move on to the 1857 to 1920 period, where the relationship between the Britishers and us Indians started to change, right? Then you talk about the independence period and the kind of literature that was produced during that point of time, especially the patriotic and the nationalistic strain that was pretty evident, right? Then you talk about the post-independence period, wherein experiences became more inclusive, more diversified, and finally the contemporary literature or the contemporary era. With this, we now come to an end of our video. If you have any questions, queries, or doubts related to Indian English literature, UGC NET exam, or literature for that matter, then please mention it in the comment section below and I'll be very happy to help you. Apart from that, if you want to know more about my courses and how I can help you in your UGC NET English preparation, you can check the description box below. If you found this video informative and helpful, please like, share and subscribe to my channel for more such insights on literature and UGC NET English exam. Thank you so much for watching till the end. I'll see you in the next one.